So this is pie season, and in today's episode I'm gonna walk you guys through some pie science, if you will. So we're going to make 4 different crust recipes. 2 of them are savory, 2 of them are sweet, and they are slightly different in balance when it comes to the fat levels and the, of course, the presence or non-presence of sugar. So this is gonna be fun, and while we're doing that, I'm gonna talk you through some of the basics. Hi folks, we're Sophie and Philippe, 2 professional chefs and regenerative farmers on a mission to empower people to grow, cook and preserve nutrient-dense, regeneratively grown, delicious food. We bring you how-to recipes, stories that bridge the gap between the land and our plates, sprinkled with a pinch of humor and lots of grit. After a wildfire burned down much of our farm, and with a baby on the way, we're working hard to rebuild our lives. Join us for some honest cooking, regenerative living, and fun farm-to-table courses and retreats. We've taken 10 ounces of flour for each basic recipe. That is 300 grams to be exact, and that is the perfect amount for a single-sided 9-inch or 23 centimeters pie. Pie dish, pie ring, pie. The thing that you bake a pie in, okay? That's it. All right, so we're gonna start off by stating that the butter for all of these recipes, I'm using butter for all of them, has to be very cold, except for this one over here. I'm gonna leave this on top of the counter, and the rest I'm going to pop back into the fridge. We'll get into that and why in a minute, but we're going to start off with the flaky pastry. A simple, basic flaky pastry, no nonsense, water, flour, salt, and butter. Let's go. What you will need for this super flaky, super buttery crust is 10 ounces or 300 grams of wheat flour, 1 teaspoon or 6 grams of salt, 7.4 ounces or 210 grams of butter, 5.5 fluid ounces or 105 grams of very cold water. So basic recipe flaky pastry, first step, adding your salt into the flour. Okay, super simple. Then mixing that around a little with your hand. And then there's 2 ways that you can incorporate the butter into your flour. The first thing that's very important is that you want to keep things as cool as possible, so touch it with your hands as little as possible. If you have a Magimix or one of those fancy KitchenAids, you can plonk this flour into it, then you add the butter on top and you just pulse it until you get this sand-like consistency. If you don't have one of those machines, and that's the easier, not easier, the other one is definitely easier, is a cheaper way of doing this, let's say you don't need a machine for it, is if you just have yourself one of these graters, and then you have very cold butter and you can grate that butter into the flour. So that's what we're about to do. Now, because I don't want sticky hands, I'm just gonna basically put my flour on top of the butter, or the butter inside of the flour, so that now I can hold it, right? And I can grind. Once the butter is grated, just gently mix in the flour with your hands and then add the very cold water to the mix. And now I'm going to add half of the water. Just going to bring this together. The rest of the water. With a spoon, not your hands, bring the dough together swiftly until it starts to bind together somewhat. I'm going to put it onto the workspace. And then I'm just going to bring it together. So when the dough just came together and it still looks very rough, don't mix it, don't knead it. It doesn't need to be a beautifully smooth dough. That will happen when you're rolling it out. Shape it into a disc and then cling film it and place it in the fridge, and it needs to be there for at least 1 hour to really chill nicely again. I have not yet found a good substitute for cling film here, but if someone who is watching has a good tip, let me know. It's important the dough does not form a crust and dries out in any way. Moving on to our enriched flaky pastry. The next one up is exactly the same, except for that we're using half water, half egg. So this is basically going to enrich the flavor a little because the egg yolk will bring more depth to the dough. You'll need 10 ounces or 300 grams of flour, 1 teaspoon or 6 grams of salt, 7.4 ounces or 210 grams of butter, 1 whole large egg, plus 2.5 fluid ounces or 55 grams of cold water. I feel like eating this raw. Must be a pregnancy craving. So once it's starting to combine, you're now going to do the exact same thing again. Just place it onto your workbench and just bring it together, but only slightly. Has a more beautiful color. It's a little bit more golden. The effect of the egg on the dough is that it will make it slightly easier to handle and add some fat to the dough, making it a little richer. Now you could either eat this whole thing raw or you could cling film it. I'm going to go for option number 2. It should be said that the flakiness of dough without an egg, though, is more pronounced. While those are cooling away, let's move on to the sweet doughs for our sweet pies. Our first is a basic sweet flaky pastry recipe. What you'll need for this recipe are 10 ounces or 300 grams of flour, 5.1 ounces or 130 grams of unrefined cane sugar, half a teaspoon or 3 grams of salt, 7.4 ounces or 210 grams of butter, and 1 whole large egg. Moving on to the sweet goody goodies. So this is a sweet pie crust and we're going to be using unrefined 100% organic cane sugar, meaning that it has most of its nutrients still in there. I mean, it is still sugar, right? So this isn't your healthiest recipe, but you know, we all have to indulge sometimes. So here we go. 10 ounces of flour, the sugar, give it a little sieve if your flour or sugar are a little lumpy for a finer texture of the dough, and then grate in the cold butter. Once the butter is slightly mixed with the flour by hand, add in the egg and bring it together with a spoon until just combined. Then move it onto the workspace and bring it together in yet another disc. This dough is slightly crumbly and a dash of water might be needed to bring it together as a whole. Cling film and refrigerate for at least 30 minutes. Lastly, Pâte Sucrée. This recipe calls for 10 ounces or 300 grams of flour, half a teaspoon or 3 grams of salt, 7.4 ounces or 210 grams of room temperature soft butter, 5.1 ounces or 130 grams of powdered sugar, and 1 whole large egg, and optionally a little water to bring it together. Okay, so this last one is a little different. We're going to do it in a slightly different order. We're first going to grate the carrots, I was gonna say. The last one is my favorite actually. It uses some powdered sugar instead of normal sugar, which means that the texture is super delicate and it leaves for a really nice subtle crack when this pastry is done. We're going to cream the butter and the sugar together and then we're going to add in the rest of the ingredients. You will need the butter to be nice and pliable when you start. Into that you add the powdered sugar and you give it a good beating until they are creamed together in a white fluffy mix. Then add in the egg and whisk again. Once the egg is incorporated, sprinkle in the flour and mix until the dough comes together. You guessed it, one more disc, let's do it. Ooh, somebody's coming home. Daddy's home! Again, combine into a disc, cling wrap, and place in the fridge to chill. And here we have it, 4 discs of pastry, a little bit of info. I'm clearly not dressed the same as I was when I started this video. So a little bit of behind the scenes info. Something came up that day, so I couldn't finish making the video. But that is actually a perfect chance for me to interject the little tidbit of info. You can make this pastry in advance. You can freeze it. I've done so. This has been in the freezer for about a week now. And I am going to defrost them overnight in the fridge to be using them today. So I took them out yesterday, they've been defrosting now, and now we're going to roll them out and we're going to blind bake all these bases for these pies. And as I do so, I will talk about the consistency and what each ingredient brings to this pastry, each individual pastry, and the way that it will behave in the oven and such. We are starting with the enriched flaky pastry by rolling it out to a thickness of 0.2 inches or half a centimeter. Flaky pastry forms when cold butter is layered through the dough. Once it hits high heats, the water in the butter turns to steam and lifts those layers apart, creating crisp flakes. Adding egg enriches the dough and strengthens the structure, helping the layers stay defined while also giving a beautiful golden finish. For best results, work with the dough cold, so no hotter than 10 degrees Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit, and bake it very hot at 200 to 220 Celsius to 390 to 430 Fahrenheit, so that the steam can properly puff up that pastry. This dough is very buttery, so it doesn't need to be buttered. All right, so this is now beautifully lined. I'm going to bake this at 200 Celsius or 400 Fahrenheit, but not before I put this back in the fridge for about half an hour, after which I will poke it with a fork so that any air bubbles that are on the bottom are not going to create this massive mounds of air. And then when it's blind baked, I'm going to move on to the next step, which is the filling. As you can see, I actually could have covered this pie as well, which is surprising because I thought that wouldn't be enough, but that's good news. We have a bit of excess. I'm going to roll this out very thinly and evenly, and I'm going to do that with all the leftover bits of pastry, and then we're going to do a little texture test, if you will, by baking off individual cookies. All right, the flaky pastry is up. So if it's too hard still, a little trick is just to break it up and put it in your Magimix for about 4 or 5 pulses, and then bring it back together in a disc. When you don't add egg, the pastry becomes a little lighter and more delicate because there are no egg proteins to strengthen the dough. It will still be flaky if your butter stays cold, but it won't have the same rich color, crisp snap or structure that eggs add. Let it gently drop in. Half an hour has passed. That means time to poke them with a fork and then blind bake them. I'm going to do that at 220 degrees Celsius or 400 Fahrenheit. While the savory pie crusts are baking, it's time to prepare the filling. We're making leek and gorgonzola pies. So what you'll need are 2 large leeks for 2 pies, 4 onions sliced, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, half a teaspoon of white pepper, 2 teaspoons of salt, 7 ounces or 200 grams of grated Parmesan and mozzarella mixed, 7 ounces or 200 grams of Gorgonzola cheese, and a generous pouring of olive oil. Start off by sautéing the onions for a couple of minutes, then add in the thinly sliced and washed leeks. Let this all simmer on a slow heat until the smell changes to sweet and appealing instead of raw leeks. Stir often to prevent burning. For the filling, measure about 2 cups or 450 milliliters of thick cream, add in all the spices and salt, and then crack 3 eggs in there. Blend with a wand mixer until evenly combined. Once the pie crusts are golden brown, take them out and start layering the dry filling in there, starting with pieces of gorgonzola. Then add the leek on top and spread it all out evenly, topping it off with the egg cream filling. Place these pies back into the oven on 175 Celsius or 350 Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes or until there is no more wobble and the cheese on the top has turned nice and golden brown. So those were the savory pies. They were super delish, super crispy, a little bit on the salty side, so you could consider to take out a little bit of gorgonzola if that's not your thing. And now let's move on to those sweet pies. The rolling, lining, cooling and piercing of the sweet pie crusts is exactly the same as we did for the savory crusts. Blind bake them for about 10 minutes on a lower temperature though. It should not be hotter than 180 Celsius or 360 Fahrenheit. Then remove the beans and bake for another 10 minutes to cook the bottom of the crust, the same way you would with the savory crusts. Take off any fan in your oven as it will burn the edges of the pie crusts. For the filling, I mixed 15.2 fluid ounces of thick cream, 450 ml, with 6.2 ounces of dates, 175 grams, and a pinch of salt. Then I added 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, a quarter of a teaspoon of allspice, and 2 teaspoons of five spice. Then I made the mistake of adding in 17.6 or 500 grams of sweet roasted potatoes, which proved to be too hard to handle for my mixer, So I transferred the mix to the other magic blender, and there I added 5.3 ounces of unrefined cane sugar and 7.4 fluid ounces of milk. The mixture also took 3 eggs and was then ready to use as a filling. I filled the pie crust equally, though I ran out of camera battery, so here's the result after I added the almonds, and then I baked them for 15 minutes on 175 degrees Celsius or 350 Fahrenheit. You can decorate these pies with some powdered sugar or some nuts if you please. I kept it rustic and simple for all these pies. I'm definitely not a pastry chef who does all the intricate decorating, but I like it when things look simple and natural. It's very bad weather and it's very cold, so it's very nice to get a little bite of pie. The cream butter crust is super subtle and not very crispy, but like has a nice crack when you cut into the top part. The one that I made with the brown sugar, it's more chewy, almost a bit like speculaas from Holland. Very good as well. Indulging in this holiday spirit. The sweet potato pies were also absolutely to die for. The crust of the cream butter one was so subtle and delicious. The other one was nice and chewy and reminded me of Dutch speculaas. It was a great success. We're going to eat them today for Fia's 7th birthday celebration. So I'm sorry we're a little bit late with publishing this weekend. If you want to see more of our cooking content, then check out one of these 2 videos. And of course, we're leading up to Thanksgiving and Christmas, so expect a lot more party and celebratory cooking coming up. If you have any questions or remarks, drop them in the comments below. And we look forward to seeing you next week. The Farming Chefs, peace out.